Intermittent fasting. Does it help with fat loss? Should you do it? Should you not do it? Well, intermittent fasting is getting a positive rap in certain areas of the fitness and wellness space, but in others, it's getting a negative rap. And honestly, there are many different benefits and side effects to intermittent fasting apart from fat loss. We've got autophagy. And if you're not sure what that is the body's cellular cleaning mechanism, which I'm going to go a little bit more in depth into. Then we've got gastrointestinal support. Fasting can, in certain ways, benefit digestion. So, what is your goal when it comes to intermittent fasting? Is it just that you're wanting to lose that stubborn belly fat? And then, who are you? Are you a man or a woman? You are going to have intermittent fasting benefit you or be disadvantageous depending on if you're a man or a woman. So we're here to cut the BS, just to give you the science, exactly what you need to know so that you're aware why intermittent fasting could be good or bad for you and in which ways. So what is intermittent fasting? Describing it in the most simply put way, over a period of time, we're going to be restricting caloric intake. And that can be on a daily basis. It could be across a week. You might have heard of certain methods of intermittent fasting, such as 16-8, where for 16 hours you don't eat, and for 8 hours of the day you do. 5-2, which I believe is that for 5 days of the week you eat, but you don't eat for 2 days. And then there's OMAD, which is 1 meal a day. We've got some very contrasting durations and extremities here of fasting. What I'm going to assume is that we're talking from a daily basis of you will wake up and maybe push back your first meal or breakfast until later in the morning or until early afternoon, and then you're going to cut off your meal maybe late afternoon or early hours of the evening. That tends to be the 16-8 method, possibly even the 18-6. Some people will only eat for 6 hours of the day. Popular claims are improved insulin sensitivity, autophagy, which is the body's natural process of breaking down and cycling damaged cells to maintain cellular health and energy balance, because we don't want lots of old dusty cells that are not operating well. And also gastrointestinal support. So by not having your digestion constantly churning away at food, we can notice improvements in symptoms such as bloating, gassiness, etc. These are some of the reasons why we choose to fast. The appeal for fat loss is that, in particular, it's going to reduce that eating window so that, let's say, for instance, I'm only eating between 12 and 6 p.m. So it's going to cause you to be more disciplined with the meals that you're having, reduce mindless snacking. You're not going to be able to get lots of snacks in that time where your eating window is reduced. And to be honest, it does also allow for enough time where your body is, if you're not slamming lots of food in that short window, is actually benefiting from enough time to digest meals. For example, 1 meal a day, OMAD, if you have one meal, then your body needs to work hard on digesting that for a few hours. Okay, we're giving our digestive tract a rest. But that could be argued depending on how freaking big is that meal that you're eating if it's only 1 meal a day. What I want to make really clear is the difference between men and women, because there is a huge disconnect in terms of the understanding between how fasting impacts men and women. And a lot of the advice that is more so positive about intermittent fasting is from studies on men or from the experience of men. So men will thrive with intermittent fasting because of a couple of reasons. And this is not for every man. This is just talking about the physiological or the biological differences between a male and a female. Testosterone and growth hormone are actually increased with intermittent fasting for men, and there is a significantly less noticeable impact with regard to their hunger hormones. Women in particular are very, very sensitive with regard to stress hormone, cortisol, and their hunger hormones, and also their female health hormones. But for a man, it's not quite as much of a mishmash of a lot of interactions as it is for a woman. So men won't necessarily notice that same level of irritability, because they've got more stable blood sugar levels compared to if a woman is fasting, and that also significantly increases her cortisol level first thing in the morning. So we just need to appreciate that there's a difference. For women, fasting increases that stress hormone, which can lead to fat storage, particularly around the midsection. Some women may become more insulin resistant with prolonged fasting. Of course, ghrelin and leptin, our hunger hormones, are upregulated with regard to the fact that we will feel really hungry when we're not given that food that we need as women to thrive. And then later on in the day, we're going to end up overeating potentially. And so from both sides, both from ghrelin and leptin, we're having those hormones upregulated, and it all just gets a bit intense. Higher stress, higher cortisol, more hunger, but then more fullness, which means more ghrelin, more leptin. So you can really start to see here how for a woman in particular, it's not advisable. Menstrual impact. Of course, with higher stress and then on top of that, less resources for the body to be healthy, you've got to think that our reproductive systems as women is constantly thinking, is this an environment where it's safe to grow a baby? If there's no fuel going in, then it's going to impact our fertility. It's going to impact our menstrual cycle because the body feels like it's being starved on an acute level, right? So we've got to be really, really conscious of this. And there is evidence that intermittent fasting for women may downregulate T3, which is an active thyroid hormone, regulates metabolism, energy production, fat burning efficiency. So it slows down women's metabolisms. As you can start to see here, there is a very, very big disconnect between those who might benefit from intermittent fasting and those who are going to suffer. So with training, you've got to think that if your goal is actually movement in pursuit of fat loss, or movement in pursuit of fitness, or movement in pursuit of developing strength, we need to move, we need to train hard. But actually, by not fueling ourselves appropriately, we're really limiting how much the body is going to move and perform well. And it shoots us in the foot really badly. So women actually rely on glucose more than fat as fuel. So if you're fasting and then exercising and the primary fuel source is not there, it's going to lead to stress on the body. And if it leads to stress on the body, it leads to high cortisol. What does high cortisol do? It causes fat storage, and it also eats into muscle tissue. So there is the loss of lean muscle tissue as a significant risk if your protein intake is not sufficient enough. Then again, if we're talking about not only muscle retention or developing strength, but we're talking about maybe your goal is fat loss, what happens if you don't eat and you exercise and it gets to midday? By that point later on in the day, because of the upregulation of your hunger hormones, you're going to be ravenous and you're significantly at risk of overeating, because it feels like you've got this incessant hunger that you can't cure because you didn't just provide your body with the fuel that it needed to perform in the morning. And obviously by some of the research now that we are seeing from Stacey Sims, we are finding out that actually having some form of protein and a small amount of carbohydrate, even first thing in the morning, can slightly blunt that increase in cortisol for women. And that is actually quite beneficial. Naturally, cortisol in the morning needs to rise because cortisol stimulates energy production, but we don't want it to rise more than is needed. We don't want to chronically have high cortisol. And we can lower that by having some food first thing in the morning. And that then leads to more muscle retention, better performance, and less overeating at the end of the day. Women also have lower muscle mass than men, generally. So actually us not eating anything in the morning and then exercising and the body digging into muscle tissue as a fuel source because we haven't eaten anything, it is 110% going to be more damaging. And the worst thing is, particularly if you're an older woman, let's say we're talking about women who are perimenopausal or going through menopause, you need that muscle more than ever before, because as your body ages, we need you to be stronger. We need you to have like a higher metabolism from the fact that your muscle is higher. But if you've got then HIIT workouts being done first thing in the morning and you're eating into that muscle tissue, you are setting yourself up for disaster and a much more unhealthy future where you're struggling to get that body fat off. There is a benefit for some women if you naturally have, let's say, a lower appetite in the morning. Maybe you are bloody incredible at controlling your hunger signaling, and when you feel hungry, you're able to just ignore that for a long time. But also we've got to consider how damaging is it perhaps to consistently ignore your hunger hormones. The body is telling you it's hungry for a reason. You should not chronically be hungry. Of course, if you are pursuing fat loss, you will feel slightly more hungry. Your hunger hormones are upregulated to tell you, hey, we're not getting as much fuel as we used to, so that it taps into body fat as its energy reserve then. But also, by being chronically hungry, you're chronically increasing cortisol. And again, that cycle begins of more storage of fat around the midsection and eating into muscle tissue. Then also we want to consider that if you've always had a healthy relationship with food, it's okay to consider those times where you're saying, I'm not going to eat during this time, and know that you can be confident there. But if you're someone who has struggled with perhaps emotional eating, binge purge, or even anorexia, severe restriction, by you putting those guidelines and barriers into when you're allowed or not allowed to fuel yourself, it is literally pouring petrol onto a fire, and you're, without knowing it, slowly over time accumulating habits and instances that are going to compound into possibly reigniting disordered eating again. And this is really not advisable for anyone with a history of disordered eating who does not have complete cure and real control over their eating now. And even then, I say that really carefully, because I think it's very rare that you're ever completely cured from an eating disorder, but rather that you know how to live with it and manage it much better. So women that should avoid intermittent fasting, if you've got a high stress lifestyle, and that tends to be most of the women that we work with, career-driven women, mums, busy professionals, any women who are doing intense cardio or lifting weights, you probably aren't going to benefit, particularly if you're training in the morning. And then anyone with irregular periods, anyone wishing to conceive, just to have a good chance at fertility, don't put yourself in the position where you're risking triggering an eating disorder, eating into muscle tissue, storing more body fat, and ruining your possible future goals because you feel like this is going to be a fast way now to lose body fat. I just wanted to take a quick moment to interrupt this podcast episode to tell you how we transform every single woman that comes on board and works with us at Team CBM to wake up energized, confident, healthy, and in complete control of their schedule, nutrition, and exercise. And it begins with a very simple discovery call. It's just a strategy call where we get to understand your goals, your struggles, your life that much better, so we know exactly what you need to do, the roadmap to get to where you want to be as efficiently as possible and in a way that's incredibly sustainable, and it means that your results will last forever. Once you begin the process, you will have everything delivered through our custom coaching app, and your tailored, personalized nutrition plans and exercise plans are created to your preferences. Whether that's home training or gym training, perhaps your nutrition could be a flexible meal plan, or it's portion guides or calories and macro targets, but we design and create that together so that it works for you. Beyond that, you will have daily communication with us if you need it, and you will have a weekly video check-in response from your coach discussing any changes and amendments to be made for the following week. We will always review your progress monthly on a monthly progress review call, and it means that your progress and your transformation is fail-proof. It is guaranteed. Beyond coaching, we provide an extensive educational platform where we include webinars, resources, guides, recipe books. Think about the value that you get in this podcast times 100, including our community of incredible women who support each other through every high and low that you could possibly imagine. So if you're interested in finding out more about joining the world's most trusted and comprehensive online coaching company for women, then all you need to do is click in the description box below to book your complimentary discovery call. And we would love to chat more with you about your goals and to get you feeling the happiest and most confident that you will ever feel. Back to the episode. The difference is, if we're talking about the claims regarding autophagy, that's the cellular cleaning, In short, the science is still very much so debatable. It's been proven that actually people who just have a lean body, a lean and athletic body, a good ratio of muscle to body fat, naturally have cellular cleaning or autophagy that happens at a fantastic level and that they shouldn't be worried. But this is still being debated left, right, and center. So there's no clear, hard evidence that there are significantly huge benefits from an autophagy standpoint if you are fasting versus just being a healthy individual with a low body fat percentage. And by low, I just mean a healthy body fat percentage. Then when we're talking about digestion, I do believe it's really important to allow at least 3 hours between meals for digestion. I don't think it's helpful to be consistently snacking and consistently eating because your digestive tract is then constantly churning away at food and it's really having to work hard. I think it makes sense to leave 3 hours for your meal to digest before you go to sleep. But outside of that, if you're having regular meals, foods that agree with you, nothing that causes disruption or irritation to your digestive tract because you're only eating foods that you know completely agree with you and that you're able to digest, that you're tolerant of. Don't eat anything that you're intolerant or allergic to. Don't eat highly inflammatory foods or alcohol. Eat good quality foods at regular meal timings. Allow 3 to 4 hours between meals and 3 hours pre-bed for your final meal to digest. Your digestion will be fine. There is no concerns about that unless you've got a chronic underlying digestive issue, which there is a whole nother side to. But at this point in time, there is no benefit to only having 2 meals a day versus having 3 meals a day and a snack, but allowing enough time for it to digest and not going to bed on a full stomach. So that's just important when we're clarifying fasting benefits from an autophagy standpoint and from a digestive standpoint. But back to fat loss, there is also the argument previously in the literature back and forth about whether actually doing cardio when you're in a fasted state, so doing cardiovascular activity first thing in the morning before consuming any food, there has been arguments that actually causes more calorie burning and therefore you will lose more body fat. But again, I'm just here to bring you the science. In the short term, more fat will be burned if you're in a fasted state because glycogen is low. The body has to use body fat if you're doing fasted cardio in the morning because glycogen is very low. It has to tap into fat as its energy reserve. But the long term is the fact that there is no difference in total fat loss when calorie intake is controlled over a period of time. So in like, let's say we're looking at it on a day basis, and it might not exactly happen on a day basis, but give or take. If you do fasted cardio in the morning, you will burn more calories from body fat first thing in the morning because glucose is not available. But over the course of the day, as long as you're controlling your calorie intake, you're not going to lose more body fat on that day than the next day if you did the same amount of cardio, not in a fasted state, and ate the same amount of calories. And there's some very, very important research studies that support this. Brad Schoenfeld in 2014, his meta-analysis showed that there was no significant difference of fat loss between fasted and fed cardio. Paoli et al., the 2011 study, fasted cardio increases fat oxidation during the exercise, but has no effect on a 24-hour fat balance. This is exactly what I said. And that was proven in 2011, right? That in a 24-hour basis, there is no difference or no extra fat burning in 24 hours, whether you did it fasted or non-fasted. And then again, another review, a more recent one in 2017 by Schoenfeld and Aragon, showed that the total energy balance matters more than the fasting state. And obviously with what Paoli et al. Had figured out, that your total energy balance is going to matter just how many calories you burn and consume on a 24-hour basis. And actually the fasting during cardio does not make a difference. So there we are. There's quite a big argument there for why women should not be fasting. And you should be having protein, carbohydrate first thing in the morning to help to reduce a significant cortisol spike and to make sure that you're well fueled for your workout, to protect your female health hormones, fertility, menstrual cycle. and to reduce your possible risk of storing more body fat and losing muscle from cortisol being higher. It's very important to know that women are not men and men are not women. And for some reason, we've been listening to advice that is just generalized, but does very differently affect our bodies. So, if we're to summarize that, how does it look? The best protocols moving forwards? Well, women need to prioritize their overall caloric intake for fat loss. It does not matter, essentially, whether that's done in a period where you're eating for 8 hours of the day, or for 6 hours of the day, or for 12 hours of the day. But let's just say it's probably the healthiest thing that a woman can do, which is to eat every 3 to 4 hours from wake, and to have a good serving of protein, veggies, healthy fats, and carbohydrates balanced in most meals. That is essential. And if you're in a calorie deficit, you're moving, you're exercising, you are going to be losing body fat. There is no doubt about that. You don't need any hacks such as intermittent fasting. Use lower impact workouts such as resistance training, walking, low intensity cardio to prevent you from spiking your hunger hormones later on in the day. Of course, it might not be possible. If you're an athlete, you have a sport that you enjoy that increases your heart rate significantly, just understand that on that day, you'll probably feel a little bit more hungry, and that actually you still need to be mindful to stick to that calorie deficit. Maybe you want to place more food after that activity, or maybe on the days where you're doing the higher intensity activity, you allow for more food and you have a greater calorie deficit on the days of lower exercise intensity. With men, if intermittent fasting works for you, and again, you don't come under the umbrella of someone with a previous history of disordered eating, it is okay to go ahead and try fasting. And as long as you notice that it's not making you irritable or frustrated or binging later on in the day, then sure, go ahead, because it's not going to impact your fertility or your overall health as much as it would do for a woman. So fasted cardio is not necessary for fat loss. You need to listen to your body and figure out what works best for you, but just have the health concerns in mind there if you are a woman. Make sure that your meal timing supports your workouts. You should be eating somewhere between 90 minutes to 30 minutes before a workout, and definitely within 2 hours post-workout. A good serving of protein and carbohydrate to help you recover and refuel. Just before I close, I want to notify you of someone who's absolutely incredible and is changing the health and wellness industry for women at this point in time, which is Dr. Stacey Sims. She's a renowned physiologist, nutrition scientist, and she's expressed a lot of caution for women when it comes to intermittent fasting. And here's a couple of direct quotes from her. In the impact of fasting on women's physiology, she said, "Women should not be training fasted. We know from research that women who do fed training have much better outcomes." And on the research basis of fasting benefits, Stacey Sims said, "Almost all of the data about how beneficial intermittent fasting is based on sedentary, obese men." So yes, intermittent fasting could be helpful for a variety of reasons, but it's not a magic bullet for fat loss, and women need to be particularly mindful of the hormonal impact. If you have any questions regarding intermittent fasting or hormonal health for females, please do not hesitate to drop me a message. You've got the links in the description boxes below, whether that's to book in for a complimentary discovery call with me or just to find me on Instagram and ask me a question. But I really do hope that you've enjoyed this episode and that it's opened your eyes to what is optimal for you. Please don't forget to subscribe if you're listening on YouTube, to give the Spotify episode a rating and a like if you are on Spotify. And thank you so much, guys. I will catch you in the next one. If you found that episode helpful, then you definitely need to go and listen to episode number 7, the biggest fat loss mistakes you're making and how to fix them. It's going to be an absolute game changer for you.